Hey guys, welcome to CraterMania. I'm your host, the man they call Crater, and I'd like to welcome you all back to my 500 movies in 2025. And for this episode, this will be movies number 453 through 462. So we are almost there to that 500 movie mark coming up here at the end of the year. So glad that I've got this far. And, I was looking at the totals of all of the 500, 500 movies in 2025 series that I've done so far, and this will be my 80th episode. So my 80th video of the 500 movies in 2025. That's crazy that I've gotten this far. Like I was thinking about this earlier today. Um, this is been one of the things I've wanted to do for a long time. Not just watch the 500 movies, in one year, but just wanted to do this whole YouTube thing. I mean, I know I'm not the best at it or anything right now. I don't have anything flashy on my channel. I don't have anything like professional looking or whatever. But I'm just really glad that I finally like decided to do this because there's like many times for years I would try to start and do videos on YouTube, whether it be about movies or wrestling or collecting or whatever, and just always just like got cold feet about it for some reason, and I just ended up not doing it. Um, but I'm so glad that I finally did decide to do it this year, especially with the whole situation I put myself in of trying to, um, watch 500 movies in one year, and um, what a start to a YouTube channel, right? In its first year of trying to watch 500 movies, and I'm almost there. I honestly, like, I kind of even doubted myself in the beginning. I'm like, am I really going to be able to do this? Am I really going to be able to watch 500 movies in one year? With everything else I got going on in life, um, and here we are. So surprisingly, I'm very close to it, and I have full faith in myself at this point that I will be able to do it by the end of the year. But like I said, so you know, after this video, it'll be we're well into the 460s of the 500 movies, so we're definitely getting there. Um, so for tonight's episode, I wanted, for all of December, I'm doing a lot of, Christmas movies, and at towards the end of the year, I'm gonna be doing some New Year's Eve movies, and then got a little surprise thrown in the middle between the Christmas movies and the New Year's movies. So we'll get to that when we get there. But for this second episode of CraterMania Christmas, I wanted to focus on something that has been truly, truly special to me for pretty much my whole life, because some of my earliest memories are based around these Christmas specials done by Rankin-Bass and or Rankin-Bass, however you say their name. I always called it Rankin-Bass, but and that's what I'm going to continue to call it. But if I'm wrong, you guys feel free to correct me. But these movies, these specials, TV specials, whatever you want to call them. I've always called them movies, and that's why I'm counting them in the 500 movies in 2025, because these have been a yearly tradition for me and my family. Um, Not just my family, my wife and my child, but also my mom and dad, my brother. So this has been a tradition, a Christmas tradition for me ever since I was very very small child. Um, and it's just something I look forward to every year. This is before, a lot of like DVDs and Blu-rays and stuff, and where you can get all of these, these specials on now, and when it comes to physical media. But these were just something, I didn't have, on even on VHS. I think they existed on VHS at the time back then, but I just didn't have them. And so I would just wait, all year for these movies to be showing up on TV on CBS or NBC or whatever it is, they were showing them on, every year. And it was just a truly special time, to be with your family and enjoy these together. And like I said, I carry on that tradition to this day with my wife and my son. We watch these every year. Um, and actually, one of these that I'll be talking about tonight, I just watched with my son. He had just it was his first time seeing one of these a few nights ago, and he absolutely loved it. Yeah. So before I get into talking about these specials, I wanted to kind of go over like the history, of Rankin-Bass and just how they came to be and just what influences they've had for future films beyond Rankin-Bass and outside of Rankin-Bass Productions. Just their whole influence on the whole stop motion, animation stuff that has just been really special to not only me but to millions of fans over the years. Um, and to kind of start off by talking about that, um, you know, Rankin-Bass Productions, really created a really unique and just unforgettable landscape, of holiday entertainment. For millions just who grew up in the mid to late 20th century, just their annual television specials that we're going to talk about tonight have really became this essential, almost sacred part of the Christmas tradition. These films are not just cartoons; they are these nostalgic portals back to childhood. Just filled with memorable music and that gentle like humor and just a really one of the more important things and one of the most special things to me is the heartwarming lessons, that really define the holiday spirit. Um, so Rankin Bass, was the brainchild of two visionaries. So you have Arthur Rankin Jr., who was the creative force and the producer of all these specials, and then you have Jules Bass, who is the director and the composer of them. Um, and starting as Videocraft International, in the late 1950s, the company hit its stride when it developed its the signature style of animation, which a lot of people will come to know and love, and really what marks the charm of all of these Rankin Bass specials, and it's called animagic. So animagic was this term that Rankin Bass, coined for their specific, use of stop motion animation. And just this technique, it just involves physically manipulating these miniature puppets and these props, frame by frame, and just creating this illusion, of movement, when the frames are played back really quickly. Um, and just the look of these puppets, like they really often had this charming, slightly rough around the edges appearance, which I think is a testament just to the handcrafted nature of the whole process. And this you it's a very unique aesthetic, I think, just with the puppets, fuzzy textures and these oversized heads and just these, expressive, sometimes kind of jerky movements. It's instantly recognizable, and it contributes, immensely to just that nostalgic quality of these specials. Um, and if you look at, the collaborators along with Rankin Bass, much of the animation work was done by, the talented Tadato Mochinaga, and his crew in Japan. And really, I think, I've credited a lot of like my interest in Japanese culture and like and just everything, surrounding Japan when it comes to like, video games or anime like Dragon Ball. Um, but really, I think my main interest, without knowing it, started with the Rankin Bass production specials, with because if you look at now and and you're kind of you know knowledgeable about how Japanese animation is done, you can kind of look at these puppets and all of the just everything that's crafted within these specials by Rankin Bass as definitely having that Japanese influence. And it wasn't until like, a few years back that I realized that how many Japanese crew were involved in these specials. Um, and they have this crew that worked on these, just really created this unique cross cultural blend, of American storytelling and just that artistic Japanese craft. Um, and the sound, when it comes to all of these, it's just a foundation because just the success of the visuals, and these was really just matched by the quality of the sound. That these specials were known for their original memorable songs, primarily written by Maury Laws and Jules Bass. Where Maury Laws would do all the music and Jules Bass would write all the lyrics for them. And just when it comes to the influence from Rankin Bass, Rankin Bass played a crucial role in making the whole stop motion animation popular and and legitimizing it for television, particularly in the United States. And they demonstrated just that stop motion could effectively tell, this long form story, 45 to 60 minutes or longer, for a primetime audience. And before their success, stop motion was mostly relegated to short films or you know mostly short films. So, but the success, of all of these Rankin Bass, production films, and success of Rudolph, and just all of the the specials that would follow that, just prove that the whole commercial and artistic viability, of that kind of medium, and this success indirectly would influence later animation studios and filmmakers you know Aardman Animations, who did the Wallace and Gromit series, and then just even Disney, who would go on to work with stuff like Nightmare Before Christmas and James and the Giant Peach, and but those would have these kind of far more sophisticated techniques, but the work of Rankin Bass set that nostalgic benchmark for what a major stop motion holiday event could be. Um, they cemented just the idea that stop motion, with its kind of warm feel and just it's just perfectly suited for that holiday storytelling. Um, and just as a devoted fan, who grew up watching these films, religiously, each one of them holds that special place, for me, and it really marks, that transition into that season of giving. And they are just a timeless collection of stories that just explore, themes of belonging and charity and just, just really the true meaning of Christmas. And that's really why I love these films so much. And we'll start off with the one that kind of brought everyone's attention to Rankin Bass. And in 1964, we have Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. And Rudolph is a timeless holiday masterpiece that just holds, a special place, not only in my heart, but in so many people around the world. And especially as a big fan of Rankin Bass, films that I am, this was special to a lot of kids growing up in the 90s, right along with me. And, growing up, this charming animated special was just an essential part, of our Christmas tradition, and it continues to warm my heart, every holiday season, every time I watch it, and what makes this film so enduring is just that it's warm storytelling, just that vibrant, flawless stop motion animation, and just these unforgettable characters, that just feel like old friends every time you watch it. So, the story's message of acceptance and just, believing in oneself, resonates really deeply, just reminding us that our unique qualities are what makes us special. Um, and you have the lovable Rudolph, with his shiny red nose, is just a perfect, perfect underdog, and just his journey from rejection to being a hero is both inspiring and heartwarming. And these supporting characters, from Hermie the Elf to Yukon Cornelius to my favorite character in the special, which is Bumble, the Abominable Snowman, all of these characters add humor and depth and just that sense of camaraderie, that really captures um, that true spirit of Christmas. And the tone here is just this kind of delightful, blend of whimsy, adventure, and just gentle moral lessons. It's all brought to life, with that Rankin-Bass signature style that we've all come to love. The music is absolutely iconic. Songs like Silver and Gold, and of course, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. It just evokes this kind of nostalgia and joy, that resorts back to your childhood. And it just, perfectly complements, just that, these colorful, handcrafted sets and these puppets. And the craftsmanship behind this special is evident in every frame. It showcases this kind of dedication, to detail that just makes it feel magical. I mean, I don't know any other way to put it. It really does. It feels like, especially for the time that this came out, 1964. It's just incredible, like what kind of content, this type of content was being put out, and it just innovated so much in terms of animation. And watching Rudolph as a kid and now as an adult, I just feel this, this overwhelming sense of warmth and hope and family. That's definitely one of the biggest things when I watch these films. It just reminds me of my time growing up as a kid, along with my family, join these, and I'm so glad I can still continue to do that year in year out with my own family. It's more than just a holiday special. It's a celebration just of kindness and perseverance and just that importance, of embracing our differences. Um, this film is just a cherished tradition, that just continues to inspire and bring joy, making every Christmas, feel a little more magical. Um, but going on to the next one, so I mentioned this one. Well, I alluded to this one a little bit earlier when I said that this was the first time my son Noah had ever watched this one, and he absolutely loved it. And that's the Little Drummer Boy from 1968. So, and again, as I said earlier, as someone who grew up in the 90s with just a deep love for these films, the Little Drummer Boy is another one of those that holds a special place in my heart. It's more than just a Christmas special. It's this timeless tale, that just captures this true spirit, of the holiday season. And the animation, though, classic and simple by today's standards, it just, you know, it puts out this warmth and that nostalgia, just instantly, transporting you back to those cozy, family gatherings, around the television. Um, I mean, every time I watch this, it instantly, sends me back to sitting in the living room with my mom and my dad watching these, all day long as they would show them on, right around Christmas, would be on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, or just, anytime, sometime before Christmas, if they were just showing them, we always had just a blast watching these movies. Um, and just the vibrant colors, one of the things is what stands out the most to me when it comes to these, and just those expressive characters that breathe life into the story. It just really makes it feel both magical, and heartfelt. Um, so the story is beautifully crafted here, just emphasizing these themes of kindness and sacrifice, and just that the power of music to bring people together. This little boy's journey is both inspiring and touching, and just it resonates deeply, with the idea that even these smallest acts of love can really make a difference. And I've learned that, all throughout my life, that there's nothing truer than that. Um, and then if you look at the music, or you listen to the music, I guess you should say, especially the iconic song, "The Little Drummer Boy," it's definitely a highlight. It's soulful melody, perfectly encapsulates just the emotional core of the story. It's a song that I love to this day when it comes to Christmas music. It reminds me just of the importance, of compassion and humility. I think that's definitely something a lot of us in this world could learn to embrace. Um, but the voice acting here is very sincere and charming. And it just really adds this layer of genuine emotion that elevates the story. The direction here by Rankin Bass they ensure that every scene is just infused with that right amount, of wonder and reverence, and the score complements just the animation beautifully, just enhancing, the overall atmosphere with that without, kind of overpowering the story or whatever. Um, but watching the Little Drummer Boy as an adult, just reaffirms, why it's so cherished. And I could see how special that this TV special was to my son as we watched it together a few nights ago. It's very heartwarming, and it's beautifully crafted. This is it's a piece that captures, the whole essence of Christmas. Hope and love and unity, and it's a holiday tradition, that I cherish deeply, and it continues to, inspire me every time I watch this year after year. This special isn't just, a Christmas cartoon. It's it's a timeless reminder, just of that true meaning of Christmas. And I'm so glad that my son loved it when we watched it, and so can't wait to continue on that tradition with him year after year. Um, so the next film here I want to talk about is, I think a lot of some people's favorites when it comes to Rankin Bass. It's a very well-known Christmas song, um, and just so everybody knows this song too, based from this cartoon, and that's Frosty the Snowman from 1969. So Frosty the Snowman, definitely another one of those Rankin Bass productions that holds a special place in my heart. Um, and like I said, it's one of the most beloved Christmas classics that I grew up watching, and a lot of other people grew up watching. And I'm like I said, I'm a big fan of Rankin Bass, and I just always appreciated that. That charming, animation style, whether it be with puppets to just the straight up regular animation like in this in Frosted Snowman. Um, and Frosty the Snowman continues that tradition with Rankin Bass of that warm storytelling and these timeless messages, you know, and just from the moment, that cheerful opening song kicks in, I'm transported back to those winter days, just filled with my family and laughter, and all that, holiday magic that we all love. Um, what makes Frosty truly special is just that simple yet heartfelt story about, kindness and friendship, and just the magic in believing. The film captures that innocence of childhood wonder perfectly. With the snowman coming to life through, the iconic magic hat. The characters are wonderfully endearing here, from the children to the slightly grumpy but, ultimately caring adults, and even the magician himself. Um, the voice cast's performance just bring that warmth and that personality that makes, each scene kind of resonate with, genuine emotion. Um, and the animation itself, was like I said, is classic Rankin Bass craftsmanship. It's just so delightful and nostalgic, with just that, um, that straight, classic animation, not the stop motion, but just that classic animation, that would, be just as special as the stop motion, puppet, handcrafted puppet style that would always, lend that kind of timeless charm to it. Um, and just the musical numbers in this one, especially Frosty the Snowman, is has just become infectious, and have become that holiday staple in not just my family, but so many others around the world. Um, just I love the humor and the adventure, and just that heartfelt sentiment, just really making it accessible for all ages, and reinforcing that true spirit of Christmas. Um, Watching Frosty always, just fills me with this happiness, and then just like this childlike joy, and really, I'm like kind of like a renewed sense of wonder. It's a reminder to cherish simple things in life like friendship and kindness, and just especially during the holiday season. Um, it's more than just a cartoon. It's again, it's one of those cherished traditions that just evokes warm memories and that comforting sense of nostalgia. So yeah, Frosty the Snowman is just a timeless classic, that just continues to bring joy for people, and that magic, year after year. Um, so the next one I want to talk about, and this is a truly special one for me. Up there right with Rudolph. While this is not my favorite, this is would probably be my second favorite. I'll get to my favorite here in just a little bit, but this is probably my second favorite when it comes to all of the Rankin-Bass Christmas specials. And it's Santa Claus is Coming to Town from 1970. Um, so this classic 1970s, stop motion gem is just a beautifully crafted and heartwarming story that just, captures, again, like most of these Rankin Bass productions do, the true spirit of Christmas, just with a timeless charm, that still resonates today. Um, and that going back to what I was talking about earlier, the whole animation that the Rankin Bass had, kind of innovated, known as animagic, is nothing short of magical here. And Santa Claus is Coming to Town. Just the handcrafted, puppets, and just move with all this amazing expressiveness that just makes the story somehow feel alive in a way that modern CGI, you know, cannot replicate and will not ever be able to replicate. Um, just watching Chris Kringle's journey from being a lost baby to becoming the legendary Santa Claus just feels like witnessing, this cherished family heirloom, just lovingly preserved and passed down through generations. Um, the attention to detail here in the sets and the characters, um, especially in Somber Town, like when you see something about these kids and just the whole look of Somber Town, it has this very doom and gloom and like depressing gothic look to it, but that was always so appealing to me, and I absolutely love it. And but just like I said, the attention to detail here just really kind of creates this nostalgic atmosphere, and it just instantly, again, one of those things that just every time I watch them, it just transports me back to my childhood during the Christmas season. um, and I want to talk about Fred Astaire here. Fred Astaire was the postman character in Santa Claus is Coming to Town. He's also the narrator for the entire story, and he really adds that layer, of just warmth and elegance, guiding us through this story. Um, and also the voice performances from Mickey Rooney. Um, and I just got done talking about Mickey Rooney in my last episode here on the 500 movies in 2025 when I was doing horror for the holidays. As Mickey Rooney was one of the main characters for Silent Night, Deadly Night 5. Um, and I just found that, so funny because, just years prior to Silent Night, Deadly Night 5, Mickey Rooney was the voice of Santa Claus for so many of Rankin-Bass's productions Christmas specials. But like I said, you have him, you have Keenan Wynn as well, who does the voice of Winter Warlock. And just the rest of the cast, they bring each character to life with sincerity and humor, and just, making everyone, even from the mischievous, Burgermeister, Meister Burger, uh, to the Winter Warlock, very memorable and endearing. I love all the characters in this one. Um, what truly, really moves me about this special is just another, instant of Rankin-Bass, showing that message of kindness and generosity, and just, the importance of community. It's and I've expressed that several times here on the channel, how important, community is to me, whether it be just, the movie community, horror community, the wrestling community. It is so important to me because I feel like without these things, without this community, these fandoms and the fan bases surrounding all the things that we love, they wouldn't be as great as they are, And I feel like it's always important to remember to, instead of pushing people away in that exist in that same community as you do, um, always show kindness and just, show that generosity towards, other people that love the same things you do, to help uplift them and build that community and helping it grow more and more, and, making it more, beloved than it already was. Um, and that's why these specials are so important to me. And I just resonate with them so much, is because all of those things, all those things I've talked about is something, that I have believed in, and that were important to me. And obviously it was important in the storytelling for all these Rankin Bass specials. Um, and just sorry to get off track just a little bit, but just move on, talk more about, Santa Claus is coming to town. I just wanted to say that really quick because, like I said, that is something that's really important to me. So I just wanted to share that with you guys. But, this is a story. When it comes to Santa Claus is coming to town, this is a story about how Christmas traditions, the givings of toys, the magic of belief, the spirit of caring, are all woven into, the very fabric of our lives. You have the transformation of the grumpy mayor, and the redemption of Winter Warlock. Just, it highlights these themes of hope and redemption, that are as relevant today, as they were, over 50 years ago. Excuse me. So the score here in Santa Claus is Coming to Town, especially, that iconic title song, is another one of those things that's just infectious and uplifting. And, you know, actually my favorite song in this entire one is, and I always catch myself, singing it sometimes here, especially around Christmas season. Not when I'm just watching this movie, but just like sometimes I'll just be, it'll pop into my head, and like it's that infectious, and that's put one foot in front of the other. I love it's like the whole scene when Chris has, um shown kindness to Winter Warlock and shown that it's okay to, to be kind, and it's okay to be good and not, do these bad things, these, and just show anger towards people all the time. And it really, that within that scene, that transformation of Winter, it's one of my favorite parts of the entire movie. Um, and just, all, like I said, just all these songs in this special just really captures that joy and that wonder of the season. The pacing is just right, and this the special balances that humor and adventure and all these heartfelt moments, and just really, another one of those special that kind of makes it accessible for children, while still meaningful for adults. Um, and just watching this movie year after year just fills me with that sense of warmth and that nostalgia that is really hard to find in so many things nowadays. It's more than just a cartoon or a holiday special. Um, it's just this timeless tradition, that just reminds us, of the magic of Christmas that I talked about, and just that power of kindness. And even after all these years, I mean, it continues to make me feel hopeful and just and loved and just connected to that true spirit of the season. Um, but moving on to the next film, and this is another much like the animation from Frosty the Snowman. We come back to that simple animation with "Twas the Night Before Christmas" from 1974. Um, so this one is just this charming animation, that beautifully captures just the magic and the warmth of Christmas, much like these other specials do, and just kind of blending those those luminous visuals with just that heartfelt story. What I love most about this special is the storytelling. It's timeless, like so many of these other specials, and it's rooted in that that classic poem "Twas the Night Before Christmas," which it's brought to life here with that kind of that tender narration and this that classic Rankin-Bass animation with and its music as well. The animation style is just the look of it is much like the Frosty the Snowman was. It just has these gentle colors and just evokes that kind of that innocence that instantly transports us once again back to those Christmas days of our childhood. And the characters, especially Father Mouse and the Trundle family, just they really remind us again, of that importance of kindness. And you'll see that's an ongoing thing with all of these. Just kindness and family and community is a big thing amongst all the Rankin Bass films. And the tone in this one just it strikes a perfect balance between gentle humor and that heartfelt emotion. It really creates that cozy, festive atmosphere that just really makes me feel both nostalgic and uplifted. Um, the story's message, about understanding and forgiveness and is just beautifully conveyed, without being overly sentimental. So it definitely makes it another one of those that resonates across generations. Um, and you have Joel Gray's musical narration. This one combined with George Gobel's voice, it just really adds that layer of intimacy that just draws you into the story. Much like a lot of these specials do. Um, just the specials pacing is just right. Enough to kind of keep children engaged, but slow enough to kind of savor the details and charm of each scene. Um, Watching this special always kind of just fills me with that sense of gratitude, reminding me of those family traditions and just that magic of believing. And it's a cherished piece of my childhood for sure. And I'm glad to see it continues to inspire that warmth and wonder every Christmas season amongst so many other people in this world. But that brings me now to my favorite Rankin Bass Christmas special, and I think this is a lot of people's favorite too. I have some friends. My friend Amanda said told me not too long ago that this was her favorite as well. So glad to see a huge appreciation for this one, and that's Year Without a Santa Claus from 1974. Um, this one holds a very special place in my heart. And like I said, it is I can confidently say, it's my favorite, amongst all these Christmas specials. Um, but, all of these films that I'm talking about tonight were just so so special to me, but this one more so than the others. And it this one particularly just kind of is special because it always stood out, to me with its message. Um, from the very start, the animation burst with that signature Rankin-Bass charm, the vibrant colors, just that detailed puppetry, the nostalgic aesthetic that just makes you feel like you're wrapped in this blanket of Christmas magic. And like I said, I could say that for so many of these, but this story's premise is refreshingly a little bit different. So Santa, feels vulnerable, and just unsure if the world even still cares about Santa or Christmas or in general. And this vulnerability makes Santa more relatable and human, uh, which is kind of a departure from the omnipotent figure that we usually see. Um, again, the characters here wonderfully crafted, especially Santa himself and the Miser brothers. I have to mention them. And again, Santa is much like Santa Claus is coming to town. He's voiced by Mickey Rooney once again here, and just his Santa's initial reluctance and rediscovery of the true spirit of Christmas just beautifully mirrors that emotional journey that resonates with me even as an adult. And you look at Mrs. Claus's caring faith in Santa, and it really adds this kind of touching layer of hope and that love that really hits home. um Jingle and Jangle, the adorable elves in the story, they just really bring this kind of delightful mix of mischief and earnestness, and just their adventure in Southtown is both amusing and heartfelt, and it really captures that essence of Christmas spirit, you know based off of community and kindness and perseverance once again. um, then you have, the musical numbers here is one of the things that really makes this one so special to a lot of people. Especially the catchy and memorable Heat Miser and Snow Miser songs. I'm Mr. White Christmas. I'm Mr. Snow. I love it. I mean, and just the Miser brothers are probably my favorite characters in the whole story here. Just everything about them just is pure joy. Um, and these characters are iconic to me. And just their kind of playful rivalry just injects humor and that liveliness that keeps that story engaging from start to finish. Um, and then the clever use of Mother Nature, as the Miser brothers' mother, is this as this kind of wise, neutral force. It really adds this kind of charming fantasy element to it, that elevates, the story's themes of cooperation and understanding. Um, what truly resonates with me is just the message that Christmas isn't just about gifts or these grand gestures, but about the kindness and that spirit that live in everyone's heart. Just so watching Santa, decide to go on his journey again, just inspired by that love and generosity of these children worldwide. Just it fills me with just warmth and hope. And there at the end, when Santa's looking at those letters, from the kids, because Santa's wanting to take that year off because he's, like I said, he's not sure people even care about it anymore. But then he sees these letters from these kids, and they're all very sad because they know that Santa's not coming that year. And it's set to like this children's choir rendition of Blue Christmas. And I absolutely love that. That's one of my favorite parts in the entire film. Um, and just like I said, it just really fills me with that warmth and that hope. And just as it did when I was a kid, this special reminds me that the magic of Christmas, will always be alive, when you see them in the acts of of caring and sharing, and just which is, I think, is a timeless lesson that a lot of people need to learn. And it continues to touch my soul every year when I watch this film. I mean, it's the absolute goat when it comes to Rankin-Bass Christmas specials for me. Um, so I guess in short, the Year Without Santa Claus is it's just that heartwarming reminder, of that true meaning of Christmas. Just beautifully presented with all the charm and nostalgia that make Rankin-Bass specials so beloved. It's a timeless classic that that just never fails to make me feel joyful and hopeful and just deeply connected to the spirit and the magic of Christmas. Um, Now, this next one I want to talk about, I think this is my wife Candace's favorite when it comes to Rankin-Bass. Now, I will say this: she likes the Rankin-Bass films, but I don't think they are as meaningful to her as they are with me and some other people. She'll watch them, but she's just not crazy about them like I am, I guess. But I know that this is her favorite when it comes to the Rankin-Bass specials, and that's Nestor, the long-eared Christmas donkey from 1977. I think this one is my mom's favorite too, honestly, if I think about it. But Nestor the Longer Christmas Donkey is another one of those beautifully crafted tales that just it captures that true spirit of Christmas, and that's with hope and perseverance and kindness. Now that's an ongoing thing, but that's why these are so special because all of that stuff is so important to me. And then if you look at the animation here, it again has that warm, nostalgic charm, that instantly just, brings those memories back. Once again, like I said, I'm pretty sure this is my mom's favorite. So have a lot of good memories watching this one with her. Um, the characters here are, especially Nestor, are just very endearing. You know, Nestor with his long ears just kind of symbolize not just physical difference, but just the power of inner strength and compassion. Um, and the story's message is, Nestor's journey from being teased and cast aside to become this hero, guiding Mary and Joseph through the storm, you know, resonates deeply. It's a reminder that our perceived imperfections can become our greatest strengths. Um, which is a lesson that feels especially meaningful to children and adults alike. And then you have Tilly the cherub. She adds this gentle and divine touch. Just emphasizing themes of faith and divine guidance. Um, the tone strikes this balance between adventure and warmth. Never overly sentimental again, but always sincere. The voice acting, the musical score are these nostalgic treasures, just with songs that will stay with you for a long time. And it's all narrated by the amazing Roger Miller. So if that tells you anything, then definitely you should watch this if you have never seen Nestor the Long-Eared Christmas Donkey. Um, the animation's just rich, detailed backgrounds and those expressive characters, just enhance the story's, emotional depth and just making every moment in this special feel genuine. Um, but what truly resonates with me is how Nestor's story, elevates this humble donkey into a symbol of hope, during the most wondrous, night of the year. It's a story that I love to revisit, every year. It reminds me that um, even the most overlooked, can become you know, Christmas miracles. It's a classic that just continues to evoke those feelings of joy and love and just that unwavering faith. And it's truly a treasured holiday tradition for me. Um, Now, this next one I want to talk about, I consider this a Christmas special, even though it's like the dates inside of the story are kind of all over the place. So it starts out like on Groundhog's Day, and then the story kind of goes back to um, like a few weeks before Christmas, and then it kind of like later in the story it goes back into springtime. Um, but just because of the whole winter setting, I consider this a Christmas special for Rankin-Bass. And it's definitely one that I love. I love this one so much, and that's Jack Frost from 1979. Now, I know I just did the horror movie Jack Frost, but now I'm going to talk about the Rankin-Bass special of Jack Frost from 1979. And like I said, even though some people will question that this one is actually a Christmas special, I consider it one, and I just think it's a true treasure, in those holiday traditions, including my family's, traditions. Watching this one for years and years growing up, just again with the that from the moment it begins, I'm transported into this world where Jack Frost, the this immortal winter sprite, embarks on this journey of love and bravery and self discovery. Um, and the narration by Buddy Hackett, as the groundhog in the film, just and then you just pair that with these delightful characters like Snip and Holly. It instantly creates this very warm and nostalgic atmosphere that just really fills me with so much joy and happiness watching this, and just those memories of my childhood. um the story's premise, Jack transforming into a human to win over Eliza, is it really resonates deeply. Just kind of capturing that timeless theme of sacrifice for love. Um, and the animation, especially with that meticulous stop motion, craftsmanship, just it still holds up beautifully today. Just the textured, handcrafted feel of the characters really, sets this sense of wonder and just reminding me, this like of just all those evenings, I spent watching all of these charming tales, with my family. The special effects in this particularly, the blizzards and the Iron Castle of Kubla Kraus are so imaginative and just really add this layer of enchantment that just perfectly complements the story's tone. Um, what truly makes Jack Frost stand out is just like I said, that heartfelt message about self identity and just the true meaning of love. Jack's journey from this playful sprite to this selfless hero who risks everything, for the people he cares about is genuinely inspiring, and the film's tone balances that humor and emotion effortlessly, just making it suitable for viewers of all ages. Um, it's a story that leaves you with this kind of sense of warmth and hope, and just, it's an essential ingredient, I think, of any holiday classic. Um, the score and the voice acting are top notch here. When you have Robert Morse's portrayal of Jack and Deborah Klinger as Eliza, just captures that emotional core beautifully. Um, the scene where Jack finally understands what truly matters is a moment that still makes me get filled up with emotion. Just fill me with that same joy and hope that I felt as a kid. Um, so, Jack Frost is, more than just, a Christmas holiday special, whatever you want to call it. It's a timeless celebration, of the magic that winter and the holiday spirit bring. It's a heartfelt reminder that sometimes, the greatest gifts are the sacrifices that we make for love and just the warmth of friendship and family, and just watching it now, I feel that same childhood wonder and that excitement, and I just cherish, that feeling, more than words can say. Um, but that brings me to the next special I want to talk about. I've only got a few more, but this one is always stood out to me as a, even though it is technically a Rankin-Bass Christmas special, just because of its characters, which are the leprechauns. And your leprechauns are mainly seen as these, creatures, these characters. When you think of a holiday, you think of St. Patrick's Day, but you don't really think of Christmas. So it's very unique and very interesting to see that the Leprechaun's Christmas Gold from 1981 as a Rankin-Bass Christmas special. But this is such a good one, and just watching it again, as an adult, just only kind of deepens my, affection for this charming, richly crafted tale. From the moment that the story begins, you're kind of transported into this world, um, where these whimsical, Irish, leprechauns, are just brimming with warmth and humor and just this touch of magic that really, you know also encapsulates that spirit, of Christmas. um and just the stop motion animation, is as detailed, and lively as any other Rankin Bass production. It just imbues, the characters and the scenery, with this kind of endearing, timeless quality that just really makes the entire experience feel amazing. um so this story's themes, of generosity and love and redemption, just resonate profoundly. I find myself moved every time I watch this by Barney and Faye's, story, and which reminds us that, kindness and understanding can conquer even the most ancient grudges. And the specials tone strikes just that right balance between, lightheartedness and, heartfelt emotion. Um, Never, sacrificing depth for just the sake of holiday cheer. But the voice acting here is absolutely delightful. Bringing to life, the leprechauns and old Mag and Denty Doyle with just this all this warmth and personality. And the character development feels very genuine here, and just the specials, message about that true meaning of Christmas, and just giving from the heart. It's very touching. And the score here, just with this very cheerful and haunting melodies, just enhances the whole magical atmosphere of it. While that vivid production design, transports these viewers to this kind of mythical Irish landscape that feels both, fantastical and inviting. Um, but what truly stays with me is that sense, of wonder and the hope that the story instills. It's just a reminder that, even in that face of mischief and misunderstandings, love and generosity can, bring about these miracles, especially during this time of year. And watching the Leprechaun's Christmas Gold is like wrapping yourself in this warm Irish blanket. I know it's such a weird thing to say, but it does. It feels makes you feel very nostalgic and joyful and just endlessly inspiring. Um, but now that brings me to the last Rankin Bass Christmas special I'm going to talk about this evening. Um, and that is The Life and Adventures of Santa Claus from 1985. And this was actually one of the very last few of the Christmas specials that Rankin Bass would ever do. Um, And I've not watched this one as much as I have a lot of the others, but watching this back again this past week was it's an extremely charming story and just a very different origin story when it comes to Santa Claus. So if you've never seen Life and Adventures of Santa Claus, I definitely suggest seeking it out and checking it out just to see how different it is when it comes to the story of Santa Claus. Um, but even though I've not seen this one as much as the others, it's definitely a highlight. When it comes to the Rankin-Bass Christmas specials. Um, what strikes me most about this adaptation of L. Frank Baum's beloved book, which if that name's familiar to you, L. Frank Baum is also the one who wrote all of the Oz books, Wizard of Oz, Return to Oz, and so forth. Um, but he did, the Life and Adventures of Santa Claus, book as well, and just this adaptation really, brings that rich and that mythic tone that just elevates Santa Claus, from this mere gift bringer to this legendary, immortal figure with this noble origin story. So the film story is beautifully layered, just highlighting themes of kindness and perseverance and importance of giving, much like all the other Christmas specials done by Rankin-Bass Productions. It's not just a story about Santa. It's a heartfelt journey of compassion and just that transformative power of good deeds, which resonates deeply, with me, even as an adult. Um, the animation is something to marvel here, especially considering, like I said, it was one of the last projects to feature that iconic animagic stop motion style, that Rankin Bass had perfected. The craftsmanship here, in each puppet and set really just creates this kind of tactile warmth that, that again instantly transports the viewer into this fantastical world. The forest scenes with just their these lush details and just that these charming slightly quivering movements of the characters just really evokes this nostalgic charm that just makes me feel like a kid again, just eagerly awaiting Christmas morning almost. The characters are an absolute highlight here. You have Claus, voice with this gentle earnestness. Unfortunately, it's not Mickey Rooney this time around doing the voice. I forget the guy's name that actually does the voice of Santa in this one. But it really still embodies that spirit, of kindness and selflessness that I always had aspired to emulate. And you have the wood nymphs, with their tender devotion, and then you have the wise and the noble great Ack who adds these layers of mythic warmth to the story. Their interactions are just imbued with sincerity, and just the voice acting breathes life into these characters in a way that feels very genuine and heartfelt. Um, just the story's themes of good versus evil, perseverance and just the face of adversity, and just the importance of kindness are woven seamlessly into the narrative here. The depiction of the Aguas, and their mischief really adds this element of conflict, that keeps the story so engaging. But ultimately, the triumph of good, and the celebration of Santa's legacy just leaves you with that sense of hope and joy. Um, but what truly resonates with me is just how the film captures, that magic of Christmas once again, just as a time of giving and compassion and wonder. And it's just a gentle reminder that, the spirit of Santa Claus isn't just about the gifts, but about just embodying that kindness and joy that we share with others. Watching this special, I feel that same childlike awe and that warmth and just it's the kind that makes Christmas feel like this divine, this divine gift, I guess you could say. Um, while some might critique, the slower pacing or, the nostalgic style is dated, you know, I see these as just part of that timeless charm, just like any of these other Rankin-Bass production films. It's a heartfelt myth that invites us to believe, in that magic of goodness and just making it this, you know, really such a amazing film when it comes to the whole series of Rankin Bass Christmas specials. Um, to this day, just rewatching it again, just like it always did in the past. It fills me with that enduring sense of hope and that true spirit of Christmas. Um, and just the legacy of Rankin Bass is far more than just a collection of dated cartoons. It's a permanent fixture, in the cultural memory of the Western world. Um, you know, First and foremost, just it brought this establishment, of the broadcast Christmas canon. Rankin Bass specials were instrumental in, just defining the concept of the annual must see Christmas special on broadcast television. And for decades, the airing of Rudolph or Frosty or Santa Claus is coming to town, whatever, these were all major events on when it came to television, not just a regular show or that would air from week in week out. The showing of these specials every year was a major event for broadcast television, and it really kind of created these rituals where these films created that powerful sense of ritual where families would clear their schedules, gather around the television and watch, these broadcasts of these specials. And that's one of my fondest, Christmas memories as a kid is watching these with my family. And this annual event would, it fostered just that collective experience amongst so many other people that did the same as I did with my family. And so, we would all kind of call, ourselves these, these collective misfit toys of the Rankin Bass production fandom, I guess you could say. Um, but just the to talk, I want to talk about like the initial purchase price of the rights to the specials was just repaid, many times over by these continuous, profitable re-airings and just proven that just, the financial staying power of quality holiday content, which is something that we still exist to this very day. Um, Now, Rankin Bass had also perfected just the use, of these celebrity narrators and these voice actors, just which, elevated these specials from just simple children's, programs to these grand, events on television. The use of stars like Burl Ives and Fred Astaire, Jimmy Durante, Mickey Rooney, uh, all these names, just provided that instant credibility and just brought, unique character to the voices. Um, and just these voices are now basically inseparable, from these characters that they portrayed. Um, for example, you have um, Mickey Rooney as Santa is just it's pure perfection, and I so every time I'm gonna think, Mickey Rooney, like the Rankin Bass Christmas specials where he voiced Santa is definitely something I'm always going to think of right off the bat. Um, and if you think about just the enduring power of the soundtracks here for these specials, the songs created by Maury Laws and Jules Bass are just as enduring as the visuals, as I mentioned that earlier. They're not merely background music, but just they're integral to the storytelling. And you have these, timeless hits like, the Holly Jolly Christmas from Rudolph, put one foot in front of the other for Santa Claus is coming to town, and the Miser Brothers songs, or just all these beloved, holiday standards, Frosty the Snowman, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. I mean, all of these. There's so many of these, and I feel like it was just genius for Rankin-Bass to kind of take all those songs, which they were just as popular back then amongst Christmas culture as they are today. So to kind of bring all those alive and these storytelling, with stop motion animation is just it's amazing to me, and it's like I said, it's truly one of the greatest things for me growing up as a kid to watch these. Um, the music infuses every special with just this necessary emotion, just making these moral lessons that are being taught in the stories, like Hermie finding his calling, or Chris Kringle choosing joy over fear. It just makes all of them land with that genuine impact. Um, and at their core, many Rankin Bass specials are deeply sensitive explorations of just social anxiety and finding that self worth. From Rudolph and Hermie to Nestor, and the characters from Twas the Night Before Christmas. All these characters are often defined by this feeling of inadequacy, or just being different. The specials resolution always involves a character realizing that their flaw is the very thing that the world needs. And just that message, just that of acceptance is what makes these specials so timeless. And for me, at least, I mean, and just it really continues to resonate with so many new generations. And like my son Noah is a fine example of that. I mean, in a day and age with the new generation of kids, of like what their humor is, or what their interest is when it comes to television. A lot of kids being obsessed with YouTube and this whole 6-7 bullshit that's going on nowadays. Excuse my language, sorry, but just a lot of it just feels like so different. And which I mean, but that is the case. I mean, every generation has their own kind of different culture and trends and style and everything. I get that, but it just feels like this generation, the young generation now's you know um, style and culture and everything is just I don't want to say like bad or any, because I know it's special to them. Like it's something it's just very different to me. But like I'm just that's what kids like. But it's just and it's so meaningful to me that knowing my son um loves these specials and just appreciates the stop motion animation, just everything, all the moral messages that that comes from these stories. And it's because you don't see a lot of kids nowadays that even care about these kinds of things anymore, these specials, and and the deep meanings behind them. So it makes me a proud dad to know that my son does care about those types of things, and still loves the things that I grew up with as well. But I guess in conclusion, Rankin Bass Productions, has just left not just an indelible mark on animation and television and the global celebration of Christmas, but it's definitely left an indelible mark on me and who I am as a person. Since I grew up watching all of these, they were masters of simple, earnest storytelling. Just elevated by their charming that animagic technique and just unforgettable musical scores. Um, these specials are are not just relics of a bygone era. They are vital yearly reminders that magic can be real if you believe in it. That it is often hides in the most unlikely of places, and just that the best gift that you can give is just simply the most honest part of yourself. And for those of us who grew up with them, a Rankin-Bass special playing on the screen is just that sound and that sight of Christmas itself. Um, and I hope you enjoyed this video of me talking about these Rankin-Bass Christmas specials, because I truly had a great time, just talking about them, watching these this past week, just reliving all these memories that I had with my family growing up, and just creating new ones with my own family now, with my son and my wife. Um, so this was a very special episode for me, for sure, of the 500 movies in 2025. But I want to thank everyone who, if you watch this live or if you're watching this on the replay, thank you so much for tuning in and just checking this video out of me talking about the Rankin-Bass Christmas specials. Please drop me a comment below on what your favorite Rankin-Bass Christmas special is. Let me know why, and that way we can discuss that and just kind of have a great discussion about why these are important. These movies are important to you, just as they are to myself. Um, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. I'd really appreciate that. If you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button below, for more, to see more videos like this one. Got several more coming up for the rest of the month, so be sure to check those out. And as always, click that bell for any future notifications. But with all that said, I'm Crater. This is CraterMania. I love you guys. Have a good night.